Hey moms, it's Laura Ollinger. Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast. Because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Hello and welcome, Positively Healthy Moms. Welcome to my show, The Positively Healthy Mom. Today, I am welcoming my guest, Barbara Achilles Minardi. So Barbara, say hello to the Positively Healthy Moms.
Hello, Positively Healthy Moms. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's introduce you, who you are, what you do, why you're here. So I brought you on today because I was so intrigued. You and I kind of started following each other on social media a while back. I don't know how the connection happened, but it just did. And I've been so impressed with your work. So what stood out to me was you offer workshops and classes for really kids of all ages, but you can kind of clarify that. And so tell us, like, what is your focus?
Well, I have a children's program called ATX, and it was founded in late 2022. And it's a children's program that focuses primarily on character education, modern manners, and leadership development. And I work with kids, like you said, from 6 to 16 primarily. And I have the privilege to be able to go to all these wonderful community organizations and talk to different scout troops and sports teams. I have enrichment programs in with a few of the school districts here in Central Texas. And I basically create and host these workshops designed to help children, then giving them life skills that I think will help, give them a leg up as they age, help them socially, academically, and hopefully one day professionally.
That's amazing. And so why don't you tell us, like,
Yes.
what, in your opinion, is the importance of learning these character strengths? And also maybe you could tag on to that in the conjunction. What are about the modern manners? Is that kind of the same thing or is that a separate thing?
Well, our character education, character is who we are at our core, right? It,
Mhm.
it defines the actions we take, the behaviors we have, how we feel about ourselves, how we react and engage in the world, and
Mhm.
it's the foundation of who we are. So to not focus on
Mhm.
it, I think is troubling. That's why I want to focus on it. I want to have an intentioned focus on these topics, and then it ties in with modern manners because to be honest, when I first started doing this, I didn't think that manners really had a place today in a contemporary society.
Mhm.
But it does. It so much does. And the more I do this, the more I realize just how relevant it is, especially since so much of our engagement and the way we communicate with each other is online or,
Mhm.
via email or text. So when we have the opportunity to meet in person and engage with each other in person and one-on-one, you need to know how to have those soft skills to build the relationships and have the best experience you can.
I think
And
it's
so, yeah.
Yeah, this the way you're phrasing that sounds good because I think what pops into people's heads when they hear manners is like
Hmm.
etiquette. And like etiquette is this like lost art and it reminds us of like, the 1800s and just being so civil and so polite. And our culture has really changed. I mean, I know in my lifetime, my mom always taught me to write handwritten thank you notes. So
Hmm.
that's a value of hers in our family. And I try really hard to still do it, but I just so prefer to just write a text, thank you for the
Yep.
whatever. It's so much
And that's
easier.
okay.
Is that the type of thing that part of what you're talking about? Just like,
Mhm.
explain a little bit more about that.
Well, our behaviors change over time, right? They're fluid. They change like communication changes, the way our language changes, the way we interact with each other changes. And now that we have technology at our disposal, I don't think there's anything wrong with, sending a text, sending a video message. The manners, that the aristocrats put out, hundreds of years ago certainly have changed, but they're still necessary. They're still necessary to show, that we have respect for one another, that we are appreciative of one another, our gratitude. Those, regardless of the time, is always going to be
Mhm.
always going to be a necessity for us to engage with each other in a civil manner.
Mhm.
So those they're still relevant. The reasons behind them might have changed, or the way that we do them might have changed, but they're definitely still relevant.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's part of actually in my signature workshop that I give. One of the words or terms that I kind of bring about to parents is I talk about the dehumanization of our culture and that how,
Yes.
people are learning to treat each other as a little bit like less than human. We have kind of evolved. And so I kind of explain this process of we're going, the standards of our culture, kind of like what you're talking about, are moving goalposts over time.
Mhm.
So what was once appropriate in the 1920s as far as what we would wear to the beach or a pool is now
Mhm.
completely different, right? That is shifted. And so sometimes like our culture shifts so quickly that humans can't really keep up with the way it
Yeah.
shifted. So then all of a sudden we're acting a little bit, uh, just less than we probably ideally would want to be, because at the end of the
Mhm.
day, it's all about human connection, right? That's all what it's
Mhm.
about. But somehow like the phones and teenagers and technology, that's kind of one of my specialties, is they're not really learning that skill. They don't have the knowledge to really understand
Mhm.
that when they cyberbully somebody or embarrass somebody with a picture, or when things go viral, that is really treating each other as though we are less than human, that dehumanization aspect.
Mm.
So it's interesting how,
Absolutely.
our two worlds kind of intersect in that way, where you're really bringing about, this knowledge to kids about how to treat each other civilly, how to give respect, how to treat them well. And so can you talk a little bit more about the character strengths that you teach about?
Well, I try and teach about as many as possible. Primarily, some of my most important or my more popular workshops deal with loyalty and honesty and friendship.
Hmm.
I have another workshop that deals with gossip, called Loose Lips Sink Ships, and how
Mhm.
gossip and is, harmful for friendships, yet at the same time, we still need an opportunity to vent, and the subtle differences between those two topics.
Mm.
I have workshops. My modern manners workshops obviously are about showing respect and gratitude and appreciation. I also talk about the power of words and how they have weight, and the ability to kind of change our world. Right? They shape who we are and the reality of what we do. And so I try and teach all of the character, all of as many character strengths as possible given
Mhm.
the workshop. And then I also have a program called Super Leaders, which I have in the as an after school program. And for super leaders, I talk about a certain historical leader throughout the world in history. And we
Mhm.
talk about and we deep dive into their character strengths, their traits, the things that have made them successful. And so it runs the gamut. I mean, from Florence Nightingale and her bravery and perseverance, to
Mhm.
grit and resilience are also a very big part of the workshops that I teach. So I really try and give as many opportunities to highlight and foster these strengths as possible.
Mm. Mhm. I love
And,
that.
and, and also, oftentimes, with children, sometimes you start off with an idea and they take it somewhere else. And so I'm always trying to be open to where they're going and allowing them to kind of guide the discussion and, teach them what they want to learn as well.
Mm. Mhm. And so, what advice do you have for parents whose kids are not able, because you able to attend your programs because you are locally based here in Austin, Texas? How
Mhm.
can you help them? Because our listeners are literally worldwide. We have listeners in every country, and so what advice can you give them?
I think it's the advice that parents know all the time, that we are the greatest teachers. Our children, we model the behaviors for our children. And so, in order for our children to become the type of people we want them to be, we need to be the type of people that they need to be. We need to be the change that they see. And so, modeling the good behavior, making sure in your everyday life, when you're late to HEB or you're running to school, that your behaviors are appropriate, because your
Mm.
children pick up on everything. And
Mhm.
in these moments when we're not really our best selves, is when we kind of do the most teaching to our children. So modeling good behavior, right, at all times, when we're frustrated, when we're angry, when we're exhausted, not
Mhm.
letting those times weaken us. And then, just taking care of ourselves, is the best thing for us to do, not only for ourselves, but so our children see that it's okay to take care of ourselves, that it's okay to put ourselves first and think of our own well-being, as a way to be stronger for everybody.
Absolutely. That's something that I talk about all the time,
Hmm.
because we as moms
It's
are
hard.
we're pretty worn out. We're pretty
Yeah,
tired. We're pretty
it's
stressed,
hard.
whatever. Yeah, it is hard. And so
Yeah.
it's so important. I just actually had a mom at my workshop yesterday who says she works with teenagers all day at school, but then she's got her own teenagers at home. And she was trying
Mhm.
to figure out how she could apply the tools that I had taught her, when really she's so exhausted because she finds that her
Tired.
her temper is just like a shot at the end of the day. And so my advice to her was just to take 5 to 10 minutes in the car before she goes in her house. I said, they're hungry, they're waiting for you, they want dinner, they might need help with their homework, but just sit in your car for 5 to 10 minutes and just get emotionally regulated, do some of the techniques I taught her, some breathing exercises, and then really to kind of empower herself through her identity. And so one thing I do teach, which, we're going to short track this at the moment, but it's just all about who do you need to be at this moment in order to accomplish what you want. And so that really just gives yourself usually the energy to be like, okay, I can tackle this part of my day. But the theme is that it's hard. Like no matter what job we have, we're still all moms, and it is hard. Even if you are the stay-at-home mom, and even if you have one child, that's still a lot, right? It's like it doesn't kind of really matter necessarily the circumstances. What matters is that we're moms, and that raising a child is hard no matter what.
Well, I was a substitute teacher for a long time as well. So I know the feeling of coming home and being completely tired of being around kids. I know, I get it. I've been there. And I would do the same thing. I would close myself in my bedroom for about 5-10 minutes, tell my kids not, I can't be a mom right now. But I think what's important in addition to what you said is also telling the children why. Like it's not you, it's not that I don't want to be a mom to you or show you the attention that you deserve, right? Because even though you've been with children all day long, or the woman that you spoke to, they've missed you all day long. So you need to be respectful of their needs as well. And I think if the more open you are and the more you communicate with your children about why I'm feeling this way and why I need a moment, again, is not only good for you at the moment, but then it'll teach your children later on how to engage with their children and, express their needs and their boundaries to other people.
I think that's awesome. And that's so important for you that you've talked about in the past is like the why with all your classes. So when you teach your classes, you're explaining the kids why you're teaching them this. So do you have some examples of that? I know the Breaking Bread program is something you give the why with.
Yeah. Well, a lot of these, and I was thinking the same thing growing up, that these were arbitrary rules, designed by some board aristocrat to drive us crazy, right? To drive us mad, have all these rules to remember. But there's really significance and an origin that makes perfect sense behind all these things, all these rules, right? From basic hygiene rules to how to show appreciation. So the why is very, very important. I hear a lot of whys in my class. But the etiquette is there for varying reasons. When we understand our expectations and what's expected of us at a dinner or a party, when we know what to expect, we can spend the time and energy doing other things, more fun things, engaging with other people. We don't have to worry about which drink is mine or where do I put my napkin or all these things that are pretty frivolous in the moment. And we can focus on engaging with people and building relationships. But it's funny you mentioned about the why, because I've been working on a new workshop called Curious Courtesies. It's kind of a tongue twister for me, but it deep delves into the why and all of the kind of odd origins of these, what we think are arbitrary rules, right? And the kind of funny and bizarre origins of them. So one, for example, I think this is one of my favorite, is why we cheers. Obviously I'm not teaching the children to cheers, but why as adults do we have the tradition to cheers? And it's actually interesting because back, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the royalty would have to be nervous about people poisoning their drinks. So as a way to kind of circumvent and to make it feel the royal family feel safer, everybody would pour a little bit of their drink into their neighbor's drink. And this over the years turned into everybody putting their drinks together and cheersing, right? Everybody sharing a little bit of their beverage to make it known that the drinks are okay. No one's going to get poisoned in this. So the whys are kind of funny, you know what I mean? And you don't really think about them until you at one of my classes and you're curious, why does this matter? So yeah, and the why is important too, because children are more apt to take it in and memorize it and have it be a lifelong lesson when they understand the background to it.
Yeah, it puts it
Yeah,
in context. It's not just some arbitrary thing.
absolutely.
Saying, yeah, it
Yeah.
has a purpose. And even if the purpose is outdated, it's still tradition. And so kind of learning about that is really good.
Yeah, it's
I
interesting, right?
Yeah, it is interesting. I
Yeah.
think the why, quite honestly, is really just as important for the mom. So if we go back to the example of the mom being super stressed out and,
Mhm.
she's just in survival mode. So if we're talking to the moms right now that are in survival mode, and then we're talking to them about learning character strengths and modern manners, like for some people that might start to put them into a tailspin.
Mhm.
They're like, oh my gosh, like I can barely get food on the table. So
Yeah.
let's speak a little bit more to the importance of, this kind of the concept of like an emotional intelligence versus the intellectual intelligence. Like we all know that we want our kids to make good grades in school and to
Mhm.
try hard because we know that has a purpose, like that'll help us get a good job. But can you share your thoughts about like building up like that person, who they are on the inside in that emotional intelligent way?
Again, it goes back to my theory about the parents being the best teachers. You have to model this behavior. If you're so stressed out, I mean, I get it. I've been there. I wish I had, a magic solution
Mhm.
to help the moms. But take a step back, remember that you're your children's greatest teacher. And
Mm.
I think, your children again pick up on every little thing you're trying that you put out into the world.
Mhm.
And so you had a guest on your podcast recently who brought out the oxygen mask
Oh yeah.
analogy that so commonly gets discussed when
Mhm.
when you're stressed out and we're frantic and we're frustrated, and we're trying to take care of so many things. Why it's so important to put the mask on us, right? Put the mask on
Mhm.
us, and so we take care of other people. But I also think it's important to put the mask on us first and to take care of ourselves first, because then the child might actually learn, oh, you know what, mom doesn't need to put the mask on me. I can put the mask on myself. And then I can help my mom. You know what I mean? I hope that
Mhm.
makes sense. But I again, it's the modeling. If you're not going to teach your children how to be a good, calm child who is harmonious and is confident when you're not. And I wish I had a magic wand or a solution to help the moms de-stress. I'm also,
Mhm.
a mom, always trying to de-stress myself.
Yeah.
But again, just remembering that your children are seeing everything. They are
Mhm.
taking everything.
Mhm.
And that's my best advice. If you need a moment to yourself to act in a way to get your emotions out, do so where your children can't see you. Go to the bedroom, act out your frustrations, and then come back out, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
That's all I
And
can
I'm
say.
thinking of, when I teach, I talk about 4 different parenting styles. And so, kind of like what I'm alluding to a little bit is maybe, actually, it could kind of fall under several different categories when I talked about the stressed out mom, because quite honestly, all parenting are
Yeah.
stressed out moms. But I have, there's 4 quadrants, if you can imagine them. And the kind of axes on the horizontal basis is boundaries. So on
Mhm,
this one side, it's very strong boundaries. On this other side, it's very weak boundaries. And then
mhm,
the top to bottom is kind of lovingness or caring, and then the bottom is a little bit less caring. And so, if
mhm,
you can imagine this, what happens is that that top left is the helicopter parent, where they are
mhm,
very, very loving, very, very nurturing, all these things, but yet they're not strong on the boundaries. And so, or there's also the other term that people use now, snowplow parenting, which is they're just
mhm,
paving the way to make life easy for their kids. They're so concerned with their child's happiness instead of having their child having to learn some struggles, so that they're actually
mhm,
building their character, building their strength, and building that grit
mhm.
and resilience. So I
Yeah,
feel like that, is like a great kind of understanding for the parents to see that maybe they are actually, I don't want to use the word harming their children, but kind of doing their children a
mhm,
disservice by
mhm,
this helicopter parenting style. And then I'll go through the styles, and then maybe you can comment on all of them. Then the bottom left quadrant is low boundaries, low caring,
mhm,
or low nurturing, and that is the avoidant parent. So they're the ones that are kind of checked out. They're too busy. Either they're too busy with work, they're too busy partying, they're too busy with something else in their life that's a distraction from the connection with their child. Or they
mhm,
just have an inability to connect emotionally. Maybe they've had some trauma in the past and they just struggle with interpersonal relationships. Bottom right is high boundaries, but low caring. And so they are like the military style parent. They are very much into control. They're into punishment. They are hardcore on rules, timeouts, taking away the phone, all sorts of things like that. And so, we probably can have some issues there. And I'd love to get your feedback about that. And then the top parenting style, the authoritative style, is what I style, which is strong on the caring and the nurturing, and also strong on the boundaries. And so that kind of really makes me think about all the things that you're doing. So can you like maybe comment on those parenting styles and how it relates to what you're doing?
The classes that I teach aren't, going to change a child's life overnight. I'm simply planting a seed. I'm one of the many, hopefully, things that are in a child's life to kind of support them and booster them up. But the parenting styles, that's all we know, right? We teach what we know. We don't consciously teach in a certain way. It's
Right.
just the way we react. It's subconscious, it's subconscious, and it's like breathing and blinking.
Yes.
Um, so I'm not the expert on parenting,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah.
Um,
No, that's kind of my thing. So I kind of threw that on you,
yeah,
But I thought it's kind of cool to just think about how our two worlds do intersect in that way, because
yes.
when you think about it, the authoritative parent, that healthy style, is really the
Hmm.
one that is probably modeling the best, character strengths
Mm,
and the best manners for their parent or for their children. That doesn't mean the other parents aren't modeling it correctly. However, um, if we're always trying to make things easy for our kids, then maybe we're not being the best role models, right? Like
mm,
maybe we are
absolutely.
bulldozing some people. Maybe we're the type that's like, well, I want to fight for my child, so I'm going to jump in line in front of this other parent, or maybe I'm going to put
Mm,
this other kid, kind of like being like a little bit aggressive or assertive for the sake of their child. But then the child's watching that, and so then
yes.
they suddenly have this like entitled thing. They're like, oh, well, I'm more important than this other family because my mom's
Hmm.
up ahead, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, it can get really complex. We could get really, really, really deep into that. So let's kind of stay focused on your lane. So yeah, again, talking about the why, the emotional intelligence.
Hmm.
What about, again, with the character strengths, I think what's cool is I know I use them to coach clients. So when I
Hmm.
can help a client feel good about themselves, whether it's the parent or the child, right? Like, I see this strength in you. How can we use that to kind of like achieve the goal that you want to achieve, and kind of really build that up? And so I have a feeling that when you're working with your classes and your workshops, you're kind of maybe asking them to like find what they like about themselves, or like
Hmm.
figure out what their strengths are.
Absolutely.
Do you help like elicit that out of them?
Yes, well, I mean, and I've been doing a lot of research on the positive psychology and focusing on our strengths and not our weaknesses, right? And that's exactly what I do, right? I think back in, when we were younger, it was what was wrong with you? How can you fix what's wrong with you? Well,
Mhm,
and then completely ignoring our strengths, the things that make us actually wonderful people. And so I
mhm,
do that. I try and focus on our strengths and allow those strengths to guide us on how to have proper behavior, make great choices, how to have, make ethical decisions. And yeah, the strengths are everything. And knowing our strengths, knowing the type of person we are is important, because then we can make better decisions. It also allows us to interact with other people better and understand other people also.
mm,
Going back to the character strengths and the teaching of them, and the intention of explaining which each one is to the children. Yes, they hear about them in the periphery, or in different venues, but to have the intentional focus on them allows them to develop them themselves and see it in other people and recognize it in other people more.
mm,
um, so I think it's important to, again, the strengths, knowing yourself, having a real understanding of who you are at the core is very important.
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I'm going to pause my conversation with Barbara Achilles Minardi. If you'd like to hear more, listen to the next episode.